Morning or good afternoon or good evening to everybody today, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Mel New. I'm the founder and CEO of IYKYK Dating, and I'm so excited to be here today with y'all as we talk about the concept of how much do you need to know about someone before a date. This has been a common question that I get and something that is totally a valid question. Before we get started, I would love for everybody to put into the chat where they're tuning in from. I always love to see where people are from, and it's exciting to see that even though we are all from different places, we all love the Lord and all have the same desire to meet somebody. Let's see, I'm going to read out some of these places. So we have Alex London. Happy New Year to you too, Alex, and Happy New Year to everybody else as well. Flying in from Oxfordshire. Nice. Awesome. Romania, London, Arizona, Illinois, Albuquerque. So fun. Sunderland, Alberta. I see some familiar names. Awesome. Well, I'm going to go ahead and, Alex actually offered to open up in prayer. And sure, Alex, if you want to go ahead and raise your hand, I would love to have you open up in prayer. That's a great idea. I'll give you a second there to raise your hand. There we go. All right, Alex, can you hear me?
Hello.
Oh, there he is. Hello.
Hello, Mel. Hi. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too. Thank you for offering to open us up in prayer.
Sure. Let us go ahead and pray, guys.
Okay.
Father God, just bless this short meeting, Father God. And Lord, would you just bless Mel, especially, Lord, as she will be the head speaker, Father God. But Lord, would you just bless everyone? We'll just have a good time of praying and fellowship, Lord. Lord, we will just bless one and each others, Lord, plus myself, Lord. We'll get the right person on the dating app, Lord, on sort. So, Lord, would you just bless everyone, Lord, plus Mel? Would you just bless you, Lord, in Jesus' mighty name? Amen.
Amen. Thanks so much, Alex.
You're welcome.
All right. So let's hop into it. So I'm sure we've all asked ourselves about someone who we're maybe talking to on a dating app or maybe met in real life and we're thinking about going on a date with them of of course we want to know information about this person before we just spend our time or our energy getting to know them further. And as I was preparing for today's talk, I wanted to think of what are some pros and cons of learning a ton about somebody before we go on a date with them and just going into a date maybe blind. And so here's some things that I came up with. I'm going to read them out loud and then I'm going to share a little bit about my own experience. I've been on over 70, 80 first dates in the last 5 or 6 years, a lot of them being from online dating. And so I have a variety of experiences of whether of me figuring out a ton of information about somebody beforehand and other times literally not knowing anything but their first name. So sometimes sometimes it's good to know a lot. Sometimes it's not so bad to not know so much. So anyway, we're going to start off with why it might be a good idea to learn a lot about them before you go on the date. The first one is that You might want to know if you are compatible beforehand. And so you want to understand their beliefs and their interests beforehand, and that might help you determine if you have a compatible foundation, which is understandable. You might want to know if they have the deal breakers that are important to you. So knowing more about somebody allows you to identify any potential deal breakers early on. It might save you some time and emotional investment. You might want to know their shared goals. And so you'll be able to discover common life goals and aspirations, which can help gauge your long-term compatibility. You might be able to discover their emotional readiness beforehand if you can learn about their past relationships and experiences, which can indicate their emotional readiness for a new connection. You might be able to pick up on some red flags beforehand if you gather more information. That might show you that you're incompatible. Another one could be understanding their communication style beforehand can help ensure that you have effective and healthy communication right from the get-go. Also, if you discover whatever your shared interests and hobbies are beforehand, it can provide some good conversation starters and potential activities for the date. Learning about their personality traits or personality Enneagram or Myers-Briggs can give you a lot better understanding of their temperament and compatibility with yours. And then also gathering more information about someone beforehand can also help establish an emotional connection right from the start as well. So there's some reasons why you might want to gather information beforehand and get to know a lot about somebody. There's obviously the obvious, like we're all on the SALT app, so we're all Christians. You want to know if they are also Christian, because if you're a believer, you're only going to want to date another believer. Now, here's some reasons why maybe you don't need to know everything about them beforehand. And the first one is there'll be no preconceived notions. If you are just discovering new things about each other, there's not time to judge them and make these ideas about this person that may or may not even be true. Sometimes also knowing too much beforehand takes away the excitement and the freshness of getting to know somebody in person. Sometimes it's actually easier to establish a connection based on genuine conversation and mutual interest without having that prior knowledge. The next one, you can avoid having any biases going into that date. Sometimes also learning about each other's quirks and interests during the actual date can lead to a pleasant surprise and enjoyable experiences. Your expectations you don't have expectations really. And sometimes it can be more adventurous and exciting if you don't know as much beforehand because it's pretty novel. Next, with limited information, you can approach the date with an open mind and you can allow some unexpected connections to form. Next, you don't have assumptions about this person because you're not making unrealistic expectations or just assuming that you know what this person is like because of the things you've found out about them on their Instagram or deep stalking their Aunt Susan on Facebook. It's a lot more spontaneous and it's a lot easier to go with the flow when you don't know very much about them, kind of just open to the experience. And then lastly, it's more exciting and it can build anticipation for that first date, making it maybe a little more thrilling and memorable. And so, there's good arguments on both sides of whether you should know a lot of information about the person or go into the date without knowing very much. And I would say from my personal experiences, when I first started online dating, I remember wanting to know everything about a person before I would go on a date with them. And I remember I would ask a lot of questions just as we're on the dating app. And I almost had this anxiety where I was like, I need to know if this person and I will be compatible and I don't want to waste my time. And that's a perfectly normal, understandable way to feel. But I also realized over time that it wasn't always realistic to get to know everything about a person. And at the end of the day, someone can lie. Someone can stretch the truth. There's really only so much you can get to know about somebody by asking questions before you just have to get to know them in person or over the phone or whatever. And then I also started noticing the more conversation I had on the actual app itself, the less likely it was going to go to an actual date. And so I started experimenting with needing to know less information before I actually went on that date. And I started also realizing for me it was a way that I was needing to have control in the situation where I wasn't able to just say, you know what, God, this is a new experience with somebody who, for whatever reason you put it in front of my path. And I was able to have lower expectations for that first date as well. And I started being really pleasantly surprised by these first dates, and I started looking at them as learning experiences. And also I started being able to recognize all the anxiety inside of myself and being like, okay, Lord, I submit that to you. And I'm just going to try to practice even the art of meeting somebody new and trying to like be interested about them and seeing what I can learn about them and what this divine connection could bring for both of us. And I started really enjoying my first dates a lot more because I had really low expectations and I just treated it as them as a person, not just a means to my ends. And I think that's a huge thing that we do in dating, because obviously we want to find our somebody, right? And we don't want to waste our time. But sometimes we forget that it is just a first date. This is just a meeting point, and it's not the end of the world if I go on a date and they don't end up being the right match for me. So, all that being said, as a dating coach, I would recommend finding out if they go to church, because that's a really easy thing that you can ask somebody while you're going back and forth talking on the dating app. So what I usually do is I'll have like a flirty opener, or I'll respond to them if they like me or match with me. And then I'll be like, where are you from? Or what part of town do you live in? Whatever. And then I'll just throw out, what church do you go to? And then if they're like, oh, I haven't found a church, or I don't really go to church, or I grew up going to church, or whatever, that tells me, okay, this person probably isn't serious about their faith. Now, of course, there's always fringe exceptions, but if they don't say anything about it, then I'm like, okay, cool. And I pretty much in my head, I'm like, this guy isn't, this ain't it. But if they say they go to a church, then for me, I'm like, okay, I'm cool to meet this guy now. And if I'm still teetering on the edge, I'll suggest like a FaceTime call with them. And if that goes well, or a phone call, and if that goes well, then I'll meet them in real life. Most of the time, I personally prefer to just meet them in real life, because there's so much more you can learn about somebody through actually being in person with them. And that might make some people feel a little uncomfortable, but I think that's such a good opportunity and invitation that God is giving us to step into being uncomfortable. Because at the end of the day, if you are in public, if you let your friends know where you're going, you're going to be fine. 99.9999% of the time, this is not a crazy person. You're not giving them all your information. People meet on Facebook Marketplace with less information, right? They come to your house to buy like a chair, and you're fine. And so I would say use it as just an opportunity to work on your social anxiety, to get better at small talk. Like, you don't need to know so much about people before you go on a date, in my opinion. And one date is not getting deeply involved. One date is not, putting all your eggs in one basket. You have to remember it is just a first date. And something that someone brought up in the comments here of the idea of getting catfished, and I love that you brought that up. That's a good one as well. You want to make sure that they are who they say they're going to be. So like I said about people being able to lie, people can lie. People can say whatever they want to about themselves. I had a friend who, oh man, she got catfished like a month ago by someone posing to be by a guy, obviously, but it was actually a girl pretending to be this guy. And she's so good at she should be in the FBI. She's so good at figuring stuff out online. But it was really confronting, and it's a very uncomfortable experience. And then that can even taint your view for future experiences or future dating experiences. And you don't want to put yourself in situations where you can have bad experiences, like really, really bad experiences potentially. Now you're going to get through it if it happens to you, but I would just say meet the person and you're going to be okay. All right. So I would love to hear from people who have experienced both ways of or modes of getting to know somebody, where before they've gone on a date, they've said, I need to know all this information and tell me how that went, versus somebody who was like, I actually don't need to know a ton of information about the person. I'm just going to go on a date. And I want to hear how it went for you. And maybe you have a totally different point of view than I do. And you're like, that was horrible. I'm never not going to know about somebody before I go on a date with them. And maybe for everybody else, or for somebody else who actually had a really good experience when they didn't, know a ton about somebody before they went on that first date. And so I would love to hear from anybody who'd like to share. And while we're waiting for somebody to raise their hand, I'm going to read some of the comments in case you're driving or you can't look at the comments. Colin says, I used to be all about the long messages before meeting, but try to go for a few messages, potential video call, then meet up as quickly as possible. Yes, Colin, I would agree. Okay, we have someone who's raising their hand. All right. Hello, who am I talking to? Can't hear you. Make sure you take yourself off mute. Oh, we lost him. Okay, well, if they change their mind, raise your hand again. Okay, we have David. All right, David, go ahead. Can you hear me okay? Oh no, David, we can't hear you.
Couldn't take myself off mute. Can you
There
hear
we
me
go.
now?
Can hear you now, David.
Okay, so yeah, I've had like a couple security issues before. So sometimes I think it is good to know a little bit about the person and make sure that they really are who they say they are. But yeah, I've definitely gone into it before where like I just said, you know what, like I don't need to know everything. I just need to know that like you're a human being, and you know what, those dates always go a lot better. I've had it happen the reverse, which is really weird, where people know far more information about me than what I've told them.
Wow.
And
Oh,
that's
how'd that
really
go?
weird. Oh, I was like, one girl's like, oh yeah, like you were in a poetry club with my best friend. And I said, I was? And I was in the poetry club, but like I didn't tell them that. And so on my first date, this girl knew, like, she knew who my parents were. I didn't tell her who my parents were. How did you
Oh
know this?
no. How did that feel that she knew all
Ah,
this information about you?
I felt like I wanted to get out of there, but I couldn't because it's a small town. So I was stuck.
Oh no.
Yeah, so that was like um so and I also had once I said this in the chat, but I had once where I went on a first date with someone and they had previously been catfished with someone using my same picture. So they
What?
thought, yeah, so someone was using my pictures and they said they're like they were like, "Oh, is this actually David?" And I said, "No, it's me." But like I'm the person in the picture, but they said, "Oh yeah, like I've been talking to this person named David, but it wasn't me." And they showed me all these messages, and I was like, "Yo, I don't know who that is, but I have a learning disability. I can't really read and write, so this person has perfect grammar. That's not me." Yeah, so I've had some fun experiences. Anyways, that's been my. It's always better to just go in with your mind clear and have no expectation, and then just let the person kind of know you for who they are. Anyways,
Oh, that's so good. Thank you so much for sharing, David. I'm sorry that that somebody used your pictures as a catfish. That's such an unnerving experience.
yeah,
But I'm curious. Is that what you meant by security issues?
yeah.
Got it. Got it. Well, that makes sense. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing, David. I hope you have a wonderful day and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
All right. Oh, yay. We have a person who wanted to share it first. Just make sure you take yourself off of mute. I made you a speaker. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Hello.
Yay! Hello.
I just wrote it down on the. I actually went on a date and everything went well. Like we spoke and had good vibes, good values. But then I just realized that he was testing my faith.
Oh,
Yeah. So like I ended things really quickly.
what do you mean by testing your faith?
Like I told him that I wanted to wait until I get married and stuff like that, and he was all okay. And then next day he's like, I can't, like, for me, like I really want a passion and stuff, like feel. And I'm like, oh, I can't.
Mm.
you know and then he was like very maybe if we can work this out this way. And I'm like, no, like I really want to wait. And then he says, I'm gonna wait as long as I can, but I'm not sure if it's gonna work because I really want to feel if we connect intimately. I'm like, if we connect emotionally, we can connect intimately after marriage.
Right.
And then I told him, when you wait for marriage, and after the marriage, I told him, like, do you know that the marriage is more stronger when you wait, because then you're telling yourself, oh, I waited so long for this person, a year or whatever, like how long we waited. And then the communication, the relationship becomes very stronger because of that. And then he's like, yeah, but like I want to live this life. I'm like, okay, you're not the person I'm looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's really good that you knew what your values were and you stood firm on that, and you were able to say, what, this just isn't a good match, and wished him well, and you're able to go your separate ways. So I really commend you on this. What was your name, by the way?
Eva.
What, Eva, you said?
Yeah.
Eva. So hats off to you, Eva.
Thank you.
You bet. Get back out there though, and you're gonna find your person.
For sure.
All
Thank you. God bless.
right. Thanks. God bless you too. All right. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and read some more comments while, if anybody else would like to raise their hand and share, we'd love to hear from you. Good or bad experiences that you had with either waiting to know a lot of information about the person and just showing up to the date, or a time where you learned a lot of the information and that went well or not so well as well. Not so well as well. All right. Maranatha. All right, Maranatha.
Yay! Thank you,
Hello.
Mel. You pronounced my name well.
Yay! Okay, good. I'm glad. I was like, oh, I hope I said it right. Maranatha. Yay! Well, good morning and Happy New Year.
You too. So
Oh.
I don't have any dating experience, but what David and what we're saying brought some things to check. I feel, because this day and age, what when someone said Christian, you might not have the same definition of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that at some point I was on a pool, and there was this dating thing. I virtually I tried it, and it's like 3 minute thing. So I have to go straight to the point. I ask no, I'm talking with the Christian or not. So, and then like, are you Christian? Yeah, and I'm like, so if you get to the door of heaven, why will you let you in? It's like, oh, I got my passport. I'm like, yeah, so not a Christian. So it's sometimes to ask a question to really, what does someone means by they're Christian? Because Jesus says somewhere in the Gospels that people will do say, Lord, Lord, even cast demons in his name, and he will say, depart from me. So I think it's like clarify with people what is Christianity, what are their values, because I see they are disciples of Jesus, and they are what I call friends of Jesus. When you are a fan, you're not committed to anything. You just like this soccer player or this team, and if it doesn't work for you, you change. It's like a buffet. You take what you want and you do the other, which is not Christianity, which is just a club with Jesus somewhere in a picture, on the wall. Why discipleship? Christianity, like Eva did, you submitted your Jesus is your Lord, so you live according to those values and you don't change them accordingly. So I think it could be important sometimes to ask. And I know that in this day and age there is social media, and I mean, I'm shocked at David's story of the girl who knew his parents, and I'm like, I know people can look into your social media, but for me, I find that not knowing too much, just knowing enough, like in the sense that, okay, I know this is a human being, and like David said, and then okay, they are Christian, okay, that's a good start. A human, a Christian, good. We might have some things in common, but going to the date without knowing too much, without having to stalking a person on social media, because I feel like then you have nothing to talk about, because you know that the last trip were X and Y place, and so I feel like just know minimum, like just if you have the same faith, or not for security stuff, and out, I'm gonna get to know this person, and while talking, you discover what they don't like, what experience they have, and it makes good conversation than having you stalk their Instagram or Facebook and know everything. If some people to put everything on the socials, so I think that helps. Not knowing too much helps to have conversation topics, discussions.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
Yeah, I love that, Renata. Thanks so much for sharing. That was great. And I agree in that you don't want to know too much, because I have done this before where I have deeply stalked a man, more in my earlier days of dating, of beginning to date. And I knew so much that I was like scared. I couldn't remember what he had told me and what he hadn't told me. And so I felt like I was coming off a little awkward because I was just really trying not to say something that he hadn't actually told me. And I also remember an ex-boyfriend of mine that I had told my parents so much information about this guy that when they met him, I was telling my parents, I was like, don't mention anything about this, or don't mention anything about this, don't mention anything about this, because we had very recently started dating. And I could even see from my parents, they were just like, what do I say? What do I not say? So sometimes really getting to know them in person instead of getting to know all their information on social media can really be for the best. Now, I agree with Maranatha that you should, be able to tell a few things about them, and it can be helpful to look at their social media. For me, if I'm on the fence about a guy and I'm not quite sure if he's, maybe some of his pictures look like a little bit party, I'm not quite sure, I'll take a look at his social media before or if I'm not sure, if I'm like, am I attracted to this guy? I'm not 100% sure. I'll go to his social media to get a little bit deeper dive, more looks. But for the most part, I don't do that. I just say, this guy so far seems to check out pretty decently. Let's just meet him. And then something else that I see people are discussing here in the chat is the idea of like, how do you really know if they're a Christian though? And that truly is something that you're really going to only be able to know over time, because you're only going to be able to know character over time, right? Like someone can say all the right things. They can be like, I'm waiting to have sex till I'm married. I, read my Bible every day. I pray for an hour every morning. And you're like, oh my gosh, this person is so wonderful, which that would be wonderful if they did all those things. But you don't know if they're really telling the truth. And you don't know, people can do those activities and hold those beliefs without having the fruit of the Spirit. And I think that it's so important that we remember that in Romans 8:9, Paul says, if anyone does not have the Spirit of Christ, he does not belong to Christ. And how do we know if they have the Spirit? Well, they're going to have the fruits of the spirits, right? Galatians 5:22-23 says, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And we need to remember that those things you can really, or those characteristics, those fruit of the spirits, you really can only see over time. And I know that's not the answer we want always, because we're like, I want to know now. I want to know if because you would only get hurt. Part of us is like, I don't want to get my heart invested. I don't want to waste my time. I'm starting to get older. My biological clock is ticking. I get it. But at the end of the day, really, time is the only thing that will tell. All right. Ooh, David raising his hand again. All right. David, you're back.
I have a quick story. Is that okay?
Please, would love to hear your story.
So, just talking about like knowing too much information in the story you shared about your parents, reminded me of another story. So once I was talking with someone and they lived about 3 hours away, so we hadn't done the first date yet, and we've been talking for about 2 weeks. And she called me on the phone really excited and said, oh, my family, we did a background check on you, and you are who you say you are. And I said, you what? And she said, well, so her brother Facebook stalked me and realized that I had a mutual friend that was a former employer. So he called the employer and asked me all these personal questions. And the employer said, this person was my employee. Are you asking because he's interested in one of your sisters? Are you asking because he called it as if it was like for a job reference, and the person was giving me
lied.
Yeah. So he said, well, he said, I'm in ministry. He was a pastor. And he says, I want to know, is this guy who he says he is? And so my friend, who was also in ministry, was giving me all this information. And then halfway through, my friend messaged me later and says, the Holy Spirit spoke to him and said, ask if he's asking this because of a date. And he said, is this because, he's interested in your sister? And he said, yes. And so that was really embarrassing. And she was quite excited that her family had done this research on me. And I was like, no, that's a red flag.
So for you, what makes that a red flag for you?
Well, I think it was just that, like, I didn't give permission or consent to that, right? Even when I met her father, her dad called a local pastor in the city where I live and said, oh, do you know this guy? Is he who he says he is? And I said, no, like, this is not for me, because if you're not believing what I'm saying and valuing what I have to say, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it can unintentionally feel quite invasive. And, that's just, first impressions are important. And, maybe that's something that you keep to yourself. If your whole family stalked your potential date, it's hard not to.
Friends.
Yes, it's just hard not to feel that way. And it's hard not to feel a little unnerved if somebody has done all this information, like stalked and all the things, it's understandable, especially in today's day and age. However, it's like you have to think about how's it going to come off to other people if you do all this stuff. So moral of the story, if you stalk, don't let them know that you did it.
Yeah. And you know what? I will say my friends said lovely things about me.
Well, there you
go. They also said, they're like, David isn't the kind of person that would appreciate this. So they're like, you're probably going to lose the boat here.
Yeah, so you probably shouldn't have done that. Yeah. And I would even as a coach, ask for you, what is that bothers you about that so much? Because at the end of the day, we are supposed to vet people out, right? And I would just be curious for you, like what, so you were sharing, if you're open to exploring that. So you said it felt invasive, or it felt like they were not believing you. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah.
So what do you feel like, or what do you think, how much should somebody know about somebody before, or at what point is that appropriate to do the background search? What would you say?
I would say, if you asked me, hey, I see my brother saw that he knew somebody and he really trusts this guy. Can he ask? Yeah, but then I've given you permission. But if I haven't given you that permission to contact people in my life, you don't know the relationship that I have with that person, right? So I think if like there's nothing more attractive than consent, right? And that is a really important thing. So I think even in contacting someone, you do need to get consent, saying, "Hey, I do see there's a mutual friend. Can I ask this person about you?" I had a girl who on the dating app we were on, she noticed that we have a mutual friend, and she said, "Hey, do I have your permission to ask this person about you?" And I said, "You absolutely do." And the date went great. So that would be my answer.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about the person gives off a inconsiderate vibe if they're not asking, like, hey, can I reach out and ask this person about you, et cetera, et cetera. So that makes total sense. I would feel like that. So I appreciate you sharing, David, and allowing me to ask a little bit deeper questions. And thanks for sharing that story. That was a good, juicy story.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Bye-bye. All right. Whoops. All right. Does anybody else have any stories they would like to share about maybe a time they stalked somebody or got stalked? All right. We have Casey. All right, Casey, go ahead and click unmute so we can hear you. And let us know where you're from.
I'm okay, I'm Jamaican, but I live overseas. So I haven't really stalked anyone. I don't know if I've been stalked, but perhaps. But my question, however, is the last person that I was matched with on here. They, like, within the same day, or well, within the 24 to 48 hours, they were asking for all my social media information. I told them, I don't use Facebook. I haven't used Facebook since 2014. So I got rid of my profile. And then for Instagram, they asked, okay, let me have your Instagram. And I said, I don't really post on there, so you wouldn't be seeing anything. And then, by the time I went back in on the conversation, I saw, before I opened the message, I saw, oh, sorry. And then when I opened the conversation to see what's going on, they just deleted the chat. They unmatched, and I was like, "Is this a deal breaker? Like, me not wanting to share my social media and that kind of an information within like 24 to 48 hours? Is that a deal breaker?" Because I mean, in general, in life, I'm more on the private side. I don't share much of my life on social media, um, because partially because of my job, and just me. I'm a private person in general. Um, but it was just weird that, because of that reason, the person just right away unfollowed me. I'm thinking maybe, and from their perspective, they're thinking maybe I'm fake, or they because I don't want to show my profile. They're probably thinking, nah, this is not a real person or whatever. But I mean, in general, like, is it a deal breaker? And maybe, like, at what point would someone think that it's a reasonable period to allow someone else to share their more personal details of like their online presence and that sort of a thing?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So what I would say is when it comes to how much information you need to share with somebody, if you need to even have a social media to be able to share, in my experience, both as someone who's been asked a lot of questions and has asked a lot of questions on online dating, if somebody needs to know your social media and you haven't responded to them or haven't given it to them within 24 to 48 hours, I truly think that shows more of anxiety in them and I don't think it's a deal breaker. I think that it's totally okay if you didn't even want to give them your social media yet. You know, you're on a dating app, you're talking to them, you're giving them information as you guys are talking back and forth. I understand why they would want to know your social media. I mean, who wouldn't want to know more information about the person? But even if you had social media and you didn't want to share it with them, that's okay. And at the same time, that's okay for them to say, actually, I really want to look at somebody's social media before I get to know them or before I, talk to them on FaceTime or take them out on a date. And it really comes down to what level of comfortability do you have? Personally, I curate my social media so that it can be like a second dating app. So I don't put too much personal information on there. I mean, some of it's personal, but I always think like, how can I maximize this as its own dating app as well? So that if somebody does ask, can I see your social media? I can send it to them. Or if I can find them on Instagram, etc. And so for me, I'm also a lot more of a public person. I don't really mind sharing personal details about my life. But that's just me personally. But it is okay if you are more of a private person and don't have a social media. That just means that person probably wasn't a good match for you. Now, I would also ask yourself, could I be more comfortable with my social media, or could I be more comfortable sharing more information? And I know for you that wasn't necessarily the issue because you're saying I don't have social media anyway. But you have to also realize when you're just messaging back and forth with a stranger, there's no body language, there's no tone, there's so many things that they don't, and they might be, assuming the worst, which is their issue, not your issue. You don't need to take responsibility for that. But just as much as we judge people, you're probably going to be judged to a certain degree. And so I always tell myself, okay, how can I make my profile or make my answers or make the way I chat with somebody as, least sketchy or least problematic or least red flag raising as possible to give, because it's just human nature to judge. So maybe in their head, they could be like, oh, well, she's hiding something because she's not sharing this. Again, that's on them. That's not your thing to emotionally cater to them. But also, it's like, okay, if it could potentially open me up to more people if I did have a social media, or if I was able to share more information with them, maybe it could be beneficial. So I know it's not like there's not a one size fits all question because people are all just so different. But Casey, does that land for you? Like, what are your thoughts about that? And how does that make you feel?
Well, I mean, it had me like reconsidering, like if it's something that I need to alter a bit, to, as you say, use social media as a secondary dating app, because I mean, my Instagram profile, it has majority only persons that I know in real life, and some persons have even asked to like, oh, give me your phone number, let's chat on like WhatsApp or iMessage. I'm also weary about that. I'm wondering if it's okay. I have if I could perhaps have a secondary WhatsApp where they would be able to like message me, and I mean I can easily block them if necessary. But I don't know, maybe I'm sometimes I think maybe I'm overly cautious with handing over my information, but I mean it's a real thing in this day and age where you have to sometimes have that level of cautiousness, because there are people who will misuse your information. And I mean, um, just as the example was given a while ago, where that person was able to track down where he worked, where and everything. And I mean, your information can be easily misused these days. So I don't know. I think it's just that I need to perhaps find some sort of balance, um, as I navigate the online dating scene, to not be too restrictive, but also still observe a level of caution as I go about this. But I mean, for me, it's just that I don't like when like we match and automatically you want to move out of the dating app. Give me all your information and let's take it off of the dating app. For me, I'd like to, talk for a bit, get to know you a bit, feel get a sense of who you are, and then let's take it to the next step of talking off the app if we actually click and vibe.
Yes, that makes sense. That makes total sense. And the only maybe pushback I give you, or the only maybe thing to consider, is when you are just texting back and forth or just messaging back and forth, it is hard to really get a good sense of like who somebody is. Now there's going to be basic things, and I'm the same way, where I'll want a little bit of messaging, but I would be cautious to, I personally subscribe to the idea of try to get on a phone call or in-person date ASAP, just because it's so easy to create these emotional ties to people, or these emotional connections to somebody who you don't know what they really look like, what they really sound like, how they really talk. They're really, you just don't know, because you're talking, I mean, you could be talking to AI for all you know. And I know there are some concerns about, if they know what my voice sounds like, they could be recording it, like with the AI stuff and, with the information. And so I think that you also you can get around those kind of awkward questions that they could ask, because think about it, if you're messaging back and forth, you're going to be disclosing more and more information about yourself. And so is it really wiser to actually get on a phone call with that person, so you can at least get a feel for what they sound like? I mean, there's no way to know for sure if you're talking to the person that you think you're talking to, but it's like there might even be a false sense of security also if you're just messaging back and forth over and over and over again. So I always say try to cut out as much opportunity for miscommunication as possible. Try to get on that phone call. And I love your idea of maybe getting a different WhatsApp, or I don't know if on the Salt app you can do the calling feature, but I know on a lot of other apps you can either video call or you can phone call through the app. I think that would be a great idea, because I get it. You may not feel quite comfortable to give them like your real phone number, and that's totally okay. You don't have to. Yeah, thanks so much for calling in, Casey. Wish you luck with all your dating endeavors. All right. We have Naisha. Did I say your name right, Naisha? Make sure you take yourself off of mute. Start chatting.
Did say my name right. You are excellent. I just gotta say, this is very, very good. I've learned a lot. I took a little bit of notes, a little bit about me. I just getting back into dating. It's been like 2 years since I've dated, but I created a couple questions. You were saying to think of some things that you want to know, which I've heard before like dating a person. So I created a couple questions and I wanted to know what your thoughts were. And if you had anything to add, you're like, think about this, maybe rephrase that, so I'll just read some of them if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Okay. What does being a Christian mean to you? That's the first question. Do you have a home church? That's the second question. And of course, like the simple, like, where are you from, which everybody knows. What's a book that you think everyone should read? What does the perfect day look like to you? How would your closest friends describe you? I think sometimes we'll say like, oh, how would I describe myself? But sometimes, we feel a little insecure about that, or, we want to be humble. So it's easier to say like, how would your best friends describe you, And then how long have you been dating? And why are you dating?
Ooh, those are good. So I would love for you to go through those questions and tell me what you're hoping to learn by asking those questions.
Okay. I'm trying to see, I guess, where the man that I would be speaking to, his head is at really in some of it. Seeing by the perfect day question, I want to know if I'm compatible. Like, if you say, I want to go jet skiing and I want to do this and that, and then maybe my perfect day is, walk on the beach, reading a book, something like that, to see if that aligns. I've had, I've asked the guy that question before, and he said something really crazy that I wouldn't repeat. So I was like, okay, maybe not the type of guy that I want to be with. And then, I think sometimes when it comes to having faith, a lot of people are asking the question of like, how do we know somebody's really a Christian? Sometimes it's not what you say, it's what you do. And sometimes it's not what you do, it's what you say. So we have to be doers, but we also have to live it. Like, there's some people that I've met who are just amazing people, had trouble reading, had disabilities, this and that. But, you could tell that they were stewards of the word. And then there's other people who have read so much of the Bible, and does it make you have a higher propensity to be a better Christian? Sure. But some people, they know everything and they're a little mean. So, it's about, being loving, loving in general. So I think just knowing what that means. What does like being Christian look like to you? What does that mean to you? What does being a follower of Christ look like? So that's important. And then I asked the question, do you have a home church? Because for me, home church is grounded, as like an judgmental type of person. I go there and I experience family. And then I can go to a church where it's multicultural, or where it's maybe majority Black, or, something else. And I can experience family, maybe we look different, but that's my, my Asian cousin, or my, my sister. And you'll see, once you'll start to see the family culture that is in our faith, regardless of what we look like or how we are. And I just want to know, are you challenging yourself? When the pastor says something where you're like, dang, he's talking about me, and like, ooh, this is something I struggle with. Are you challenging yourself to go to church, even when you're like, dang, I actually don't want to go for this lecture because he's talking about something that impacts me, So that's really why I'm asking the questions I'm asking. But if you have any that I can add, what you think could be better for me, please let me know.
Okay. I love, your intentionality with those questions. And I think that's great. And I would also say, kind of what I've said before, is that people can say whatever they want to say. And I would really, those are great, like, first date questions, in my opinion. Okay. Not necessarily things that you need to know before you go on those first dates, just because it's like, yes, those are wonderful, but what if they say all the right answers in your answer, but you can't pick up on, or from your questions, but you can't pick up on body language, you can't pick up on tone. You don't really know how genuine they are in these answers, and there's so many things you just can't pick up. And so what if then you're like, this guy's perfect, we align amazingly, and but then in real life, maybe there are some problematic things that aren't really matching up with what he said, then, but your brain's already convinced he's this one way. I just always really caution against getting to know somebody so much on an online dating, messaging back and forth, before really getting to know them in person or on the phone. And they're not bad, but it's just like, also some people might not be as good at answering them. And I was even thinking, like, your perfect day, that I think it's a great question, but unless they say something that you would just never ever want to do, I mean, most dudes are gonna say they want a jet ski. You know, like that's a pretty common gentleman guy thing to want to do, to jet ski. And you know, you don't want somebody who's exactly the same as you, also because you know you want a man, and men are going to be a little more daring, right? And so I would just be quick not to write them off right away and assume that this is your ultimate test of compatibility, because you know there's just so much more to a person than you know their ideal day. If that those are like your determining. And even with like the home church thing, it's just, again, like there's so much. They may not be good at communicating over text. I've dated somebody, they're a horrible texter. They were a horrible texter, but in person we go along so well. And so it's just like there's just so many things you don't know, because not everybody is going to. I just would hate for you to write somebody off. So again, I would even ask yourself, like, why do I need to know so much information? Like, what is the biggest risk I'm taking by getting on a phone call with them? And then it might actually reveal a little bit more about your own anxieties or your own hesitations that have a lot less to do with the fact that you really just need to know all this information, and more to do with your own need to control the situation.
Okay.
Does that help?
Thank you, Mel.
You bet. Thanks for asking.
All
right. And we have a few minutes left, and I just wanted to share that I have an upcoming workshop, a dating workshop for women, specifically who are go-getters, who feel like they have everything except for just that man. And it is a workshop to help step into your authentic femininity, to step into who God really created you to be, and how to interact with men, how to flirt with men. If you find yourself self-sabotaging, overthinking, feeling rejected, I'm gonna help you feel confident, magnetic, highly desired in your dating life. And it's gonna be on January 21st, Pacific Standard Time from 4 to 7. And I dropped the link in the chat, so you're welcome to check that out. And then for the men, we also have something for you. We have something called our Men's Inner Circle. And I have a dating coach, a men's dating coach, who helps me out, who is phenomenal. His name's Calvin, and he leads those men's inner circle calls. They're once a month, and then you also get access to our Telegram channel to ask any questions at any time. And he teaches you everything from how to cold approach a girl to how to be confident. He literally has facets of every single area of dating. And he himself, 5'5", used to be very, very not confident with girls, didn't know anything about girls, and he just really worked on leveling himself up. And now he's so charming, he can get pretty much any girl he wants. So definitely recommend tapping into that resource. Put the link in there as well. We're going to open up the inner circle later this month, but it's closed right now. We only let in a certain limited amount of people because we wanted to keep it specialized, and we want to keep it small enough so that we can give you individual attention. And I hope to see you at the workshop as well on January 21st. People really end up liking that and learning a lot about dating. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. We're going to have time for one more person really fast. All right, someone who's called Calm Pigeon. I just made you a speaker. If you can take yourself off mute, you have about 1 minute to share.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can. Hello.
Yeah, okay, I'll try and keep it brief. Just a couple of things. Just to pick up on what's being said. I think with a lot of these things, you can't always put time scales on it. So someone was saying about how 24 to 48 hours they were asking for socials. If the conversation has been like really jumping, like you've been meshing a lot back and forth, that would probably kind of make sense. But if there's only been a few messages, I would be cautious about that. The other thing as well, for me, personally, my principle has always been I would at least want to, ideally video call, but at the very least phone call before I even meet up. I'm not one of these that's messaging lots and then video call. I'm like a few messages, hey, this is going well. I always ask them, are you comfortable with the phone call or video call? And I see where they go with that. And then once we're both comfortable, we arrange a time, we video call and we go from there. And if that goes well, probably in that video call, I'll say, hey, do you want to go on a date sometime? But yeah, for me, it's always about like finding that balance. What are you both comfortable with in terms of how soon you video call, you know, how soon this and that, how soon you move to other, you know, other apps. So I think that's the thing. Balance between the two of you, and timescales are different for everybody.
Yep, I think that's great. Thank you so much for sharing. And unfortunately, we're out of time now, but it was so great to be with you all.